Professor of Year last year was Adam Carrington, who's always made me feel old. Because, you know, he studies things like what I've studied and teaches things like what I teach. And I remember the day he was in my office, and I thought, I caught myself thinking, what a nice young man. And then I called myself Grandpa. He is a nice young man. He's gentle of manner. He's also a brilliant young man. He moves the students. I began to hear stories about him. And you know, around here, you guys all know, but I'll tell you, if you're not a good teacher, everybody knows. And they mostly just resign because it's demoralizing for them, you know. And we can always tell. Everybody can. Everybody can tell, right? And so when a young one comes in here and gets some distinction early on, that's such a reward, you know, for Gabler, for Adam, for people like them. Because you see, they're making a career now, and it's going to work. And you and others like you are going to remember them for the rest of your lives. What a blessing they are, right? And Adam is such a one. He's the advisor to a bunch of stuff, Pi Sigma Alpha and Young Americans for Freedom and other annoying things. Who's here from the Federalist Society? We've straightened right up now, haven't we? They're not going to be activists while they're at Hillsdale College. They're going to remember the Lincoln quote. That's good. Abigail's in class. She's a very good student. So Adam, you know, is involved in that thing. And they all come in my office, and they want to start a journal, and they want to start a lecture series, and they want to join together with other conservative groups, and Hillsdale students produce a rival to CPAC called HillPAC. And we said, no, you can't. Don't do any of that. Because why? Because you're here to study with Adam. He holds degrees from Ashland and Baylor. He wrote his doctoral thesis on the Lincoln Appoint Judge Stephen Field. He's working on a book on what judging meant to the people who knew what it meant back when we knew what it meant. And he is going to be a productive author, researcher, and scholar, as well as a splendid teacher, Adam Carrington.
Thank you. I won't deserve that, but I'll try. President Arnn, Provost Whalen, deans, staff, fellow faculty, and students, I'm honored to address you here during the penultimate convocation held here at College Baptist. I certainly anticipate, as we were hearing about, the grandeur of the new chapel. Still, I have to say I will also miss this setting. It possesses, if you look around, a beauty subtle yet profound, made deeper by a history closely tied as it is to our own. And before I begin, I want to also thank some not present, the graduating class of 2018. I thank them for the honor they bestowed upon me, itself the reason I'm speaking to you now, but much more I thank them for their years here at Hillsdale. Students often talk about how much we, their teachers, give them. We as teachers don't always acknowledge how much our students give us. And I want to thank them, in absentia, for their many generosities to me. Now, a convocation presents us with an opportunity. I've often heard it said here that collegium means association or partnership. Hillsdale College is a partnership. We congregate now, we convocate now, as a way to remember that partnership and to better understand it. Now, what comprises the substance of our association? Well, Article 4 of our college's Constitution states, and I'll quote, "The object of this institution is and shall be to furnish a literary, scientific, or theological education, and to combine with this such moral, social, and artistic instruction and culture as will best develop the minds and improve the hearts of the students. Our common task, in short, is education, the cultivation of the person and the citizen, and intellectual and moral knowledge forms the substance of what we do together. But that begs a question: what can I say to you about this, our collective endeavor? For I only teach part of that greater whole, politics. Moreover, I teach parts of that part, such as constitutional law. You could say, Tertullian said, "What hath Athens to do with Jerusalem?" You might ask, what hath con law to do with biology, mathematics, or foreign languages? However, I think that parts can provide lenses through which to see the whole. In my case, that lens is law. We think of law as a core component of politics. Legislatures make them, executives enforce them, judiciaries interpret and apply them. Yet I think the concept of law can speak to more than just my field. I think it can give some perspective about our common task. To show what I mean, I turn to Montesquieu, the 17th century French political thinker. Though writing and residing on the European continent, he was also the celebrated Montesquieu who so deeply influenced our Constitution's framers. In his seminal work, The Spirit of the Laws, Montesquieu defined law in the following way. He declared that, quote, "Laws taken in their broadest meaning are the necessary relations deriving from the nature of things." Here, he described law's essence and its foundation. First, law's essence should be thought of as relationship. The manner in which entities interact is neither accidental nor random. On the contrary, there are necessary set connections between them. Second, he noted the foundation of these relationships, the origin that makes them necessary. The relationships between entities are necessary in that they stem from the nature of things. All beings then have a nature. All that exists contains within it an ordered principle, a purpose. And that ordering forms law's foundation, the underlying component, delineating the required relationships between substances. I think that in that broad meaning of law resides a helpful way to describe our common task. At Hillsdale College, I would dare say we all study law, and I would say we do so in two distinct ways. First, this concept of law encapsulates our particular fields of study. Building off his definition, Montesquieu goes on to say that, quote, "In this sense, all beings have their laws." For instance, he goes on to say that the divinity has its laws. God relates to the world, he argues, as creator and preserver. Yet God does so not arbitrarily, but in conformity with his own character and will. Thus, to study this relation, the divine nature underlying it, means to examine one kind of law. Next, Montesquieu states that the material world has its laws. Consider the movement of planets, the composition of cells, the logic of mathematics. These relationships are founded in the particular natures of their particular elements. They are and act according themselves to kinds of laws. And of course, Montesquieu adds that man has his laws. The disciplines of psychology, history, English, foreign languages, and yes, I'd say particularly politics, study aspects of these rules. From them, we may know something of what sets man apart: his capacity for speech, his possession of a soul, his social and his political nature. In sum, we live in an ordered world whose order is discernible. In examining that order, we study laws of various kinds, originating in our Creator and defining what it is and what it should be. This last mentioned study of man then leads me to the second law, or the second way that law helps to define our partnerships here at Hillsdale. For in an important sense, whatever else we do, we all study, I would say, this last form of law, the law of human beings. In a broad sense, how could we not? For how could we teach without knowledge, not just of what we instruct, but of who we instruct? Montesquieu helps here as well. In the same early sections of the Spirit of the Laws, he gives a summary of education, its possibility, its objective, and its continual necessity. First, Montesquieu notes education's possibility. Can we even attempt what we do here? Should we even attempt what we do here? Montesquieu thinks so. He says so in calling man what I titled my talk, that flexible being. This flexibility manifests itself in the capacity to adapt, quote, in society to the thoughts and impressions of others. Human beings can change. In particular, their thoughts and impressions can alter, and learning is a change, an alteration. Human beings in their capacity to learn are capable of acquiring new thoughts, new impressions, new understandings, not to mention reforming those already possessed. Furthermore, this adaptation takes place in society. The adaptation that is learning occurs with others, a kind of imitation of those around us. Thomas Jefferson once described man as an inherently imitative being, further noting that this imitation was the seed of education in him, whether for good or ill. We learn in community. We learn in relationship. We learn in partnership. Next, beyond its possibility, Montesquieu asserts education's objective. Montesquieu contrasts the knowledge of the nature of things to the holding of what he calls prejudices. Education's goal resides in replacing the latter with the former. He touches on this goal in the Spirit of the Laws in this way, quote, I would consider myself the happiest of mortals if I could make it so that men were able to cure themselves of their prejudices. He also is a little sarcastic about how well that's going to work. But he says, here I call prejudices not what makes one unaware of certain things, but what makes one unaware of oneself. The curing of prejudice, to think in Aristotelian terms, is to move from opinion to knowledge. Education is this curing, this movement. Beginning with oneself, it extends to all law, to knowledge in all of its forms. Finally, Montesquieu describes the continued necessity of education. Man possesses two capacities equal in and of themselves. He can know his nature, but only on one condition, when it is shown to him, Montesquieu says. Thus, education is a process of showing, of revealing what otherwise is concealed. Education displays to us the distance in our minds and hearts from what we should be, with guidance on bridging that divide to the extent of our feeble powers. At the same time, education's necessity is ongoing, for this showing of our nature to ourselves is fragile. Montesquieu continues that man is equally capable, quote, of losing even the feeling of it, your nature, your knowledge of yourself and your nature, when it is concealed from him. So I would say to those who teach theology, know that, again quoting him, such a man, such a being, could at any moment forget his Creator. God has called him back to him by the laws of religion. To the philosopher, recall that, quote, such a being could at any moment forget himself. Philosophers have reminded him of himself by the laws of morality. To my own field, politics, we must never forget regarding man that, made for living in society, he could forget his fellows, and that legislators have returned him to his duties by political and civil laws, Montesquieu says. Education is as tenuous as it is precious. It is a thing in need of constant care, constant cultivation, constant defense. Thus, as we convocate, let us renew, I say, our study of the law. Let us continue to examine them as found in our chosen fields. But I especially would call on us to continue our common study, the law of human beings. Let us embrace education's possibility. Let us further its objective. Let us be vigilant in light of its fragile, continual necessity. Through so doing, we affirm our collegium. And in that ongoing affirmation, our partnership becomes more than the sum of its tasks. For our partnership at its best is a form of friendship, that without which Aristotle says no one would choose to live, even if he possessed all other goods. I am honored and humbled to belong to this collegium with you, teachers, staff, and especially you all, the students, which I still am and ever will be as well. I am honored and humbled by your friendship in and through it. It is itself a law of the best kind, a law of love. May it ever bind us together here at Hillsdale College. Thank you all very much.